Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's Design Timber webinar from Timber Development UK. In a moment, I'll be handing over to the multidisciplinary team behind Westminster Coroner's Court. Fantastic, sensitive, two-storey extension for and refit of a Grade 2 listed building. But just before that, I'm going to be saying a few words about Timber Development UK. We were formed in 2021 from the merger of the TTF and Trada to create the biggest, most comprehensive supply chain body in the UK for timber. We have three missions. One is to connect the supply chain, one is to lead best practice, and another is to accelerate a low carbon future with timber. Here you can see some of the ways in which we do that. You can see our magazine designTimber there, which is sent out to all our members alongside its sister publication supplyingTimber, which is packed full of all the information and latest news that you need in the world of timber, whether it's CPD, great timber buildings, and everything that you need to know as a timber specialist. You can also see some examples of the kind of content you'll find in our knowledge library. You can see moisture management during construction, an invaluable document there. You can see one of our knowledge sheets. That's a very good example there, all about using SIPs. You'll find plenty of similar knowledge sheets covering everything that you want to know from the world of timber design. And you can also see there one of our many case studies. That particular case study is on the Hythe, a beautiful, economical, demountable timber project. But yes, in our knowledge library, you'll find case studies of all types of timber building, large or small, using all sorts of different methodologies. Most of these resources are free for anybody to read or download, but there are also plenty of member-only options. And you can only access them if you join us. Joining us connects you to the whole timber supply chain. It also helps us put on great webinars like the one you're about to watch. So do consider joining if you're not already a member. And if you are a member, then make sure that you're making the most of your membership via things like Find Your Timber Partner, which is your own little corner of our website. Do clock in regularly with the TD UK site and make the most of everything membership offers you. Yes, in a minute, I'm going to hand over to Rachel Elliott from Lynch Architects. Just a couple of housekeeping things. There is a Q&A box that you should find, and do make the most of that. Ask any questions that occur to you, because we will have 10 minutes at the end to answer those questions with the panel, and we might answer a couple of them as we go along. So without further ado, I will hand over to Rachel.
Thanks very much, Matt. I will just share my screen. Is that coming up?
Yes, I can see that fine.
Great, thank you. Okay, thank you very much to DD UK for inviting us to give this talk. It's a really nice thing to do, particularly because we're sharing the talk with Eurban and Andy Thornton, who we worked with brilliantly on the project, and we look forward to kind of showcasing all the amazing timber work on this building. Just going to give a few quick introductions, and then I will give a project overview, and then hand over to Hannes to talk in a bit more detail about the CLT superstructure. And then I'll be passing on to Richard, who's the project director at Andy Thornton's, to talk about the internal joinery package, which was quite a comprehensive package on this project, including everything from sort of ceiling linings and wall linings to fitted furniture and doors and and a few other little bits and bobs. So to start, just to introduce Lynch Architects, I'm an associate director at Lynch. I've been working there for 16 years. We've got a studio in Hackney, and we work a lot with kind of physical things. We like to make big models, and have reference our material library a lot, and that was how we approached this project. We were appointed in 2016, so it's quite a long-running project, and that was on the strength of our work at Victoria Street for Land Securities, because we kind of built up quite a good relationship with the planners who were in the neighbouring building next door in Westminster City Hall, and they were the ones who actually put us on a shortlist for the competition for Westminster Coroner's Court on the strength of the work that we'd done on Victoria Street. So it's really just to show that we've got quite a diverse portfolio of projects ranging from large commercial buildings. Kingsgate was 100 residential apartments, and Zigzag building next door was a large office building. But we also work on smaller scale projects, including kind of sensitive heritage projects. Janks Barn here won the RIBA East Conservation Award last year. And that's been something that I've been developing in my role as an accredited RIBA specialist conservation architect. So over to Hannes. He can give a brief introduction, and then we'll pass on to Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Lynch Architects and TUK for inviting Eurban and myself to the panel. You will hear a lot of next now because Rachel is still driving the slides. So Rachel, if you don't mind, go straight to the next one. Thank you. Eurban has quite a unique setup as specialist timber engineers and consultants with offices in the UK, Switzerland, and Germany. But we really have two hats on because we also act as a specialist subcontractor delivering the mass timber structures. Eurban really prides themselves as the first company to design and install CLT buildings in the UK in 2003, and have delivered over 350 projects since. We have extensive experience across sectors in delivery of mass timber structures for developers, contractors, and direct to clients. We consider ourselves the leading innovators and providers of engineered solid timber building solutions in the UK. We also lead in high quality CLT building solutions with continuous design to site infrastructure. We are very much at the forefront of digitalization, design, and construction process, and that has also to do with how we design, coordinate these days with BIM, DFMA, design for manufacturing assembly, how we coordinate with the supply chains, because there's a very active process between the supply chains. Everything is CNC machined and processed. So it's a very interesting aspect how this coordination works. In a nutshell, when we actually work on projects and with our clients, we always strive for a design that is more than just a structure, but actually deliver more efficient and sustainable buildings. Next slide, please, Rachel. So this really illustrates our core services, which is the design engineering. So we provide fully coordinated design and engineering solutions by our in-house specialist team that is made up of the engineers, the designers, the project managers, and construction managers, and everyone who's working behind the scenes. So that also means we can actually advise on buildability straight away, not just the design aspect, but actually how it's getting built. The supply, we have a diverse network of independent suppliers and are therefore able to source the most appropriate product to deliver project-specific and design-led solutions. So whether it's glulam, oak glulam, large glulam, CLT, you name it. We have this vast network across the UK and across Europe, just to ensure the best outcome for the project. Assembly, we have our installation teams, and we have full control over the assembly process. We ensure safe and efficient installation of all our structures. And the golden thread that kind of weaves through everything is quality from inception to delivery. Next slide, please, Rachel. We use two main projects really, and that's cross-laminated timber, as you can see here. And the next slide shows you the glue lam, which is glue laminated timber. And straight into the next one, you just get an idea about the kind of scale of projects we are delivering or have been delivering. But we build a variety of structures from private residences to multi-story developments across all sectors. And with that, I'll hand over back to Rachel.
Thanks, Hannes. Over to Richard quickly for an introduction to Andy Thornton.
Yeah. So Andy Thornton's have been around well in excess of 30 years now, manufacturing and installing bespoke joinery in a number of sectors. Probably move on to the next slide, Rachel. Thank you. Yeah. So and probably on to the next one as well. So we're working in a number of sectors, especially the hospitality industry, but we've also worked on projects on listed buildings and projects like that before. CBRE were the main contractors on this project, and we'd worked with them at Oxford University, and we tendered for the works on Westminster Coroner's Court and were successful. And as I said, we manufacture in our facilities in West Yorkshire, and we actually export all over the world. We've got a particularly strong market in Scandinavia with bespoke joinery and installation.
Great. Thank you very much, Richard.
No problem.
Okay. So, yeah, I mentioned we won this project in competition in 2017. The site is quite a prominent position on the bend in Horseferry Road in Westminster, and it's quite an interesting building. It's grade 2 listed. It dates to 1893, and it was built as a result of the Coroner's Act, which required purpose-built coroner's courts to be constructed in, I think, 16 boroughs in central in and around London. Our brief was to extend the building, which had become too small to accommodate all the needs of the coroner's staff. It serves 4 boroughs: Westminster, Kensington and Chelsea, Merton and Wandsworth. And our brief was to basically provide a second courtroom, a juror's room, a family room, and a space for office space for 12 staff members to be able to work all together. So the idea was a fairly light touch initially to the existing building, but to connect the new and the old with a glazed link, and basically just improve the entrance sequence internally. The competition-winning sketch was based on the existing features of the building. There were lots and lots of arches and this semicircular bay window at the front, and internally the arch motif reoccurs throughout the building. The main courtroom is a top-lit space with a vaulted roof, and this was something that we thought was very important to try and replicate, in the new design. So this is one of Patrick Lynch's sketches showing that even though the second courtroom might be secondary to the main original courtroom, it shouldn't feel second rate, and that we could incorporate timber linings and top light to good effect, and also to sort of echo the arch motif that's found throughout the building. So it's a 2-story building with a new basement plant room that is extending the existing plant room at basement. I will just skip over these. These are a couple of pages from the heritage statement, which show that the land was leased by the Duke of Westminster on a kind of long-term lease to Westminster City Council, who were actually our clients. And the site had previously had stables on it, and there were quite a few structures beneath the ground, as well as kind of bomb damaged remnants of buildings next door. So we had quite tricky ground conditions and a very tight site. This site plan shows the mortuary to the rear, which is in operation 24/7 and was continuing to operate during construction. So there was a sort of overarching risk to the work on site, because the mortuary is a designated local disaster mortuary, which means that if there are any mass fatality incidents such as terrorist attacks or disasters like the Grenfell Tower fire, the likelihood is that this building will be co-opted to have an extended mortuary, and that goes in the taxi parking area to the side of the site. So during construction, we had a 2-hour evacuation kind of policy, and that was one of the primary reasons why we started to look at the idea of a CLT superstructure, which could be erected via a mobile crane and could evacuate from site, at short notice. Plus, the client had quite high kind of sustainability ambitions. So I think almost right from the start, we started talking to Eurban about the design. And the idea was for a 2-story extension in the west courtyard, plus 2 external new courtyard gardens. And this is just to show the sort of site logistics about maintaining access from the mortuary throughout. I will skip through these quickly. These are just proposed ground floor plans showing the office for 12 and the family room, and a sort of opened up entrance sequence to the north of the building. And then at the second floor, connected via this link corridor, the coroner's court manager's office, the juror's room, and second courtroom, which are connected and or can be used as one big space or separated into 2 for greater flexibility. And then this is just the existing courtroom to the south here, and a kind of processional route up the stair leading to that. The second floor is offices, and we didn't really do too much, but you can see on the left here the barrel vaulted roof. And these are just a ground floor plan and first floor plan showing a bit more detail. So we had quite a kind of tricky job engineering the CLT and the stone cladding, plus incorporating the ventilation system, which I'll talk about a little bit more in detail just before I hand over to Hannes. So this cross sections through the building, and a long section just showing the 4 roof lights and that space as a kind of potentially separated into 2 or being used as one space. This is a section through the link corridor, which just shows you that the external cladding of stone on the new building kind of wraps around inside, so that the link corridor feels like it's a kind of separating the two buildings. So you've got masonry on both sides. We had just some site photographs of the ground excavations and basement construction, and then basically the photograph on the right was what Eurban had to work with. The last couple of slides in this section just show the existing window openings that were taken down to ground to form doorways into the new link, which would connect the new and the old. So that's an image of those window openings being taken down to ground from outside and in. And I will pass over now to Hannes, and I'll stop sharing so that he can drive his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Second. Is that coming up?
It's coming up. I was about to say it's not quite full screen, but now it is full screen. So
is it full screen? Perfect. Super. Thank you. We started, I think we got approached in 2019 I believe, and that was at the early stages. So we were very much involved from stage 2 and 3 to help Lynch and the client to design the structure and find the best solution, how to deliver the project given the constraints Rachel just mentioned. I mean, it is on the surface, it's actually quite a small project. But obviously, we will come to the intricacies of the detailing in the presentation. But what it meant for us was essentially we were able to provide advice, obviously on the structure, on the buildability, how we get the material to site, how we manage the 2-hour demobilization period. But we also, because this is CLT, it is mass timber, we were also able to advise on other topics such as the acoustics, thermal properties, air tightness. Fire obviously played a role here as well. There were quite specific fire requirements for this building, which is also highly visual. So a lot of CLT is actually visually exposed. So the structure is on show. We were also able to advise on feasibility options and value engineering. So there were initial ideas to actually create a curved roof, so to create this dome. Ultimately, we ended up with a more efficient solution to actually create a faceted roof, and then the roof is detailed around it to get the outer shape to the curve Lynch Architects desired. The next slide really gives just a sample of the details and the interfaces we had to consider. Obviously, there's a connection to the existing building, but there's also the connection down to the slab, which also had a basement below. So there was a lot of constraint in terms of how do we align, what tolerances do we build to, how do we create the frame itself, and how do we actually achieve the architectural aspirations given the CLT was on show. And I want to pull one detail out in particular and show the kind of design process from the initial sketches to the technical design to the execution. The way it works, I think one of the key features in the building is the ground floor, and I think Lynch was quite keen to actually have the soffit exposed and also seamless. That the joints are minimal, but the only way to actually achieve this, we had to think top to bottom, up and down. How do we make this work? And then we found a solution that we had to introduce the steel beam because of the constraints. But from the steel beam, we were actually able to hang off the ceiling. So the ceiling, the floor decks and the ceiling is actually hanging off the steel beam. And the steel beam itself is then supported by 2 circular columns. So that obviously in principle kind of is understood how that how we can make that work. But then again, it's the level of detail, the level of fabrication we had to consider how to make this work in sequence. What is coming together? What is actually hanging off? What is supporting what? And this is just one example where it kind of showcases how in like an industrial product, which CLT is, because these are massive slabs, big chunky beams, how they can actually be processed and manufactured, that they you still appreciate the craftsmanship, which you then see in further detail when Richard shows his images. The side logistics, Rachel, we touched on that. So this is good. It just gives an idea how constrained the actual site is. So what you see a lorry, which is it's not. I think the way we delivered the material to site was in 2 steps. Most of our material comes from Europe, Austria, Switzerland, and is then shipped on an articulated lorry, simply because they can change the cabins from one port to another. But the site was actually not big enough to accommodate an articulated lorry. So we had to use a transport company to actually split the packages and then divide that up into two smaller lorries. What you see next to the lorry is the crane. So really like 30% of the site are already taken up by the crane. But we had to use a mobile crane to actually make sure, it's like if a call comes that there is an emergency, we had to make sure that we can de-rig the crane and move out. Space is always a consideration, especially if you bear in mind we have massive slabs, very long beams. The roof beams were essentially the entire length. We had to make sure that we actually have a sufficient laid-on area, but we also consider that we have an emergency storage area if necessary. Everything had to then, the plan was to then to store everything adjacent to the scaffold so that the mortuary can actually take over the car park. This little animation shows the sequence. It's a rather good representation how it actually worked on site. But what you can see is, or what you hopefully appreciate, is the various interfaces with a concrete slab, with an upstand, with the existing masonry of the existing cord. You see the kind of the way we panelized the system, how the slabs act, whether they're stacked vertically or horizontally, acting as beams or walls. How the steel brackets that are fixed to the existing masonry, how they're actually supporting the roof decks, which are again hanging off the structure. You can see maybe little details such as plates and half-flat joints, which kind of illustrates what we had to do and which kind of dictated the way we needed to assemble the project. So obviously it has to follow a certain sequence how we erect this building. The last slide I have here shows some shows some construction photos. But what I mainly want to show with these slides as well, it's one of our earlier projects where we all agreed to use a temporary weather protection membrane, which is now pretty much standard on all our projects we are doing, and we always encourage our clients to take this up because obviously it helps for water management if it rains, especially on the horizontal slabs. It's easy to sweep it away, to keep it dry. But in this particular instance, because it is so highly visual, it also protects the visual aspect of the timber, so you don't get stains. I mean, none of this is kind of alarming if there's a bit of water in there. Don't get me wrong, but obviously if it can be avoided, that you have to do remedial works and sanding, or worst case scenario that there is program implications because you have to wait for something to dry out. This is really a good solution that should be applied on all timber projects. What is quite unique on Westminster Coroner's Court, and I'm quite pleased that we actually managed to agree that as well. You see that the membrane is actually applied to the walls as well and over the curved roofs, which normally wouldn't really be required because you have a natural water runoff. But here, actually, the membrane acts as the vapor control layer as well, and is all factory applied, which again shows there are efficiencies to be had if some of these products can actually already be factory applied in the factory. I'm handing over to Rachel.
Thank you very much, Hannes. Could you stop sharing and then I'll
yeah.
share.
I'd also just quickly like to encourage everyone to ask questions and use that Q&A box. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Hannes. The little GIF there with the 3D is very helpful. These are some stills just showing those different processes, and also just seeing the view from the link corridor there's a little step in the link roof to accommodate an existing window to the original coroner's court, which then became an internal window. But that's the reason why that steps. And these are the kind of drawings that Eurban produced, showing the secondary steels in purple and the services holes in grey. So there was a lot of coordination to make sure that everything was perfect and lined up, not only on the new building, but also to get the floor levels running through between the existing and the new. And these are just some images of the site install, which basically took 5 days. I think the overall project, the timescale for the Eurban's install was 2 weeks, but they smashed it, and I think within 8 days we were snagging. So it was incredible to see what had been quite a slow process up till that point of casting the ground floor slab due to kind of difficult ground conditions. Suddenly the project kind of came together, and we could start to see the form of the building and inhabit it. And yeah, I think it's kind of an amazing moment on CLT projects when you have the superstructure and complete, and you can kind of experience what the building feels like for the first time. These are just a couple of images to show the kind of coordination required between some of the existing features, like this cornice over the link roof, and then the steel angle brackets, which are about to be fixed in. And then a shot from the ground floor showing the new columns and the exposed soffit, and how they connecting into the ground floor of the existing building. So just to speak a little bit about the stone, I know this is not a talk about stone, but I wanted to just explain that we worked with Sorelmi, who provided some pre-construction advice and then were taken on as the stone subcontractors. They did an amazing set of drawings, drew every single stone, rinsed through our sort of stage 4 details just to see whether there are any clashes with kind of their more detailed fixing layouts. And there was a lot going on in the thickness of these walls, with cavity barriers, fire barriers, and kind of moisture barriers, and the stone fixings for the 50mm thick cladding, which is self-supporting but needs to be tied back. So yeah, the project included a quarry visit to Bavaria to check on the Jura limestone that was being quarried and cut. And it was actually the same stone that we had used on Kingsgate, the residential building, which I showed earlier. And we knew that it was a very successful stone, kind of in terms of its durability and its appearance, because it actually looks quite like Portland stone. So we used 2 different finishes, one a sandblasted finish and one a honed wire brushed finish. But we couldn't use it at the base of the building because it's not so good for weathering. So we've got a granite base, and these just show, really kind of demonstrate the build up from the CLT to the kind of outer layer, and a point on how, you know, the accuracy of the CLT really helped, and it was pretty millimeter perfect really, and it all had to kind of fit in with the stone being cut off site and the CLT being cut in a factory. There wasn't much room for tolerance, but thankfully it all went together pretty smoothly. These are the final. These just show the 2 different finishes of stone. So the sandblasted kind of banding around the edges, and then the honed wire brush finish. So it's the same stone, but from a different bed and with a different treatment, it has quite a different appearance. The banding really ties in very well with the Portland stone banding on the existing building. And then Hannes mentioned the faceted roof that then had to be, a curve had to be formed with ribs and plywood, and then a stainless steel sheet, and then the zinc roof build up with the insulation and the membranes and the zinc to give this kind of quite mechanical finish, which is pretty perfect actually. The kind of curve is beautiful. So yeah, the kind of external part of the project, we also had 2 kind of stone courtyard gardens, but I won't speak about that too much. We haven't got time for that today. I'm going to pass over to Richard in a second, but there's a couple of things I just wanted to mention before I do that. Checking time. So we worked with Max Fordham's on the services engineering side, and we developed with them a kind of mixed mode ventilation system. So the existing building, you could open the windows. The new building, you can also open the windows, but because it's a court and it has high acoustic requirements, at certain times it needed to be able to be sealed and partly mechanically ventilated. So we have large supply and extract ducts coming up through 2 1-hour fire compartment floors from the basement into the first floor spaces. And these had to be kept separate and all accommodated within the thickness of the wall build-up. So we had a job to do to try and coordinate all of that. And this was in the context of kind of evolving regulations following Grenfell and tightening up of the sort of details that were permissible with CLT. And so we had to ensure that we had these 1-hour fire rated air routes, air paths, basically. And we needed, actually, in the end, the details didn't really change from our stage 4 details, but what changed was our need to demonstrate their effectiveness and to be clear about how they could actually be built. So we ended up doing quite a lot of hand drawings as a way of talking to everyone, talking to the building control officer, talking to the joiners, talking to the people who are actually installing it, and the M&E engineers, to make sure that we were all kind of aligned on that. So I would say that was probably one of the trickiest aspects of dealing with the CLT and the fire and the acoustics, and trying to coordinate that within a small kind of wall zone. So that's the return air path. And these are just some images showing what those fire rated kind of ducts look like before all the linings went on. I'm going to pass over to Richard now to talk about the timber linings and the rest of the joinery package.
Okay. As Rachel explained, there were a number of challenges and we had a number of workshops to work through, particularly the logistics of getting the services through the ceiling zones to form the pathways for the incoming and outgoing airways and electrical services. We were able to produce our in-house setting out details and construction details for Lynch to comment on and approve. We were able to start this because of the CLT building. We had the CLT building drawings, and obviously it's built within a very small tolerance. So the beauty was that we didn't have to wait for a survey of a completed building to at least get started with our construction details. And when we did do the survey, as I said, it was within a few millimetres. So the drawings didn't really need any changes. But as I say, we had a number of workshops to coordinate everything and produced our construction drawings, which go into our workshop then, so we can manufacture the various components. So I'll let you move on. So the design entailed CNCing a number of ribs to form the actual curves of the ceilings, and to fit onto the faceted CLT structure. So these images just show the ribs now in position, and then the forming of the various plenums before the decorative finish went onto the face. And then again, you can see on the left hand side the plenum is formed by a flexible plywood cover, and then you can see the oak timber lats. We then covered the ribs with an acoustic fire rated material, and then the oak battens are all fixed through into the ribs to form the and there's the sort of finished structure. So there was quite a few thousand meters of timber that had to be machined and fireproofed and certified. and that continued into the same field down the wall claddings. Lynch had specified a product called ligno, which we imported, and we installed, but the panels come in certain sheet sizes, and then the plan was to make up the rest of the linings in was a fire-rated MDF veneered in the same veneer, and again all re-lacquered and fireproofed. And again, you can see the interjection with the linings and the stained glass. And I think Rachel was going to say a few words about the stained glass.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in at this point to explain that we collaborated with the artist Sir Brian Clark, who sadly died last year, on this project. He had the misfortune to attend Westminster Coroner's Court on 3 separate occasions, and he felt very passionately that it was important to integrate some kind of art as a way of kind of bringing a bit of nature and humanity and kind of beauty into the building. We also had a requirement for there had been historically problems with paparazzi long lenses, kind of basically spying on the court and lip reading verdicts and things like that. So rather than introducing shutters or blinds, the stained glass, which is very vivid and quite kind of richly coloured, was a way of providing obscurity, but also kind of introducing a kind of element of like beauty and wonder into the project. And they really are stunning. As soon as these were installed, I think everyone on site realised that the project had kind of switched and kind of elevated itself. And the idea is that the west light comes in when the verdicts are made in the afternoon into this jury room or second courtroom, depending on how it's being used. And the effect of the light coming in is called transillumination. That's the term that Brian used to describe it. And yeah, so I think it was quite tricky. We integrated the stained glass into double glazed units, and then Richard's team followed on afterwards and kind of filled in the linings around them to make sure that the fit was perfect. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Yeah, they're obviously just some images of the more of the glass and the effect it gives in the new main courtroom. Yeah, and that's the linings again going in. Also, the joinery package was very varied. It included bespoke ceiling rafts, both down the new corridor and the existing corridor through the main entrance. This was to give a decorative finish and hide a lot of services that were needed to run across the existing ceilings and again in the new corridors. But I think with the lighting and the it gives a really good effect. We had a similar challenge with a vaulted ceiling in the family room. And again, it was created the same way as the main vault with a ribbed detail and the acoustic fabric and the oak lat supplied. That area also included a bespoke seating area in the family room. And again, some images of it being installed. Yeah, based on Lynch's sketches and the finished area. I'll let you go through those. Again, in the existing building and the new building, there were a number of cabinets required for the storing of files and for the office areas and reception. In the new manager's office, the oak theme continued with these bespoke oak cabinets.
Sorry, Richard.
It's okay. And in the remaining areas, which included the new main office area, we had the challenge of building cabinets to fit around the mechanical systems. and these mechanical systems needed a fireproof cladding before we could even manufacture the cabinet. So that was a case of having to wait for a survey and then set out, manufacture and install, and they all had a painted finish, and you can see the finished articles there. The main reception counter was not that big, only sort of 2.5 meters long. Was also manufactured off-site and then brought to site and reassembled. And again, in the reception at the back, you've got fitted, painted cabinets. You want to carry on, Rachel? Just
yeah, these were just the desks
and then,
for the offices, and then
for the 12 staff.
Yeah, we're probably a bit short on time, so we could maybe whiz through the doors quickly. This is a fire diagram just to show the kind of fire ratings for the existing building, compartment lines, and then the new building.
Just on the doors, we had two challenges really. The new doors in the new build needed to be of a particularly high acoustic requirements, as well as fire doors. That's where we engaged a specialist door company from Enfield Doors, and they were able to provide those and install those doors and supply us all the necessary certification for building control. So, and again, there's the openings and the doors sort of during installation. The remaining doors that didn't need that requirement, we manufactured, including to the curved openings. And then when it comes inside the existing building, there was a requirement to upgrade all the existing doors, both acoustically and fire. And therefore, we had to find a specialist who could survey the doors. You'll note at the top of there's a gentleman's name called Jerry Quayle and Associates. So they were able to survey all the existing doors and then give us the necessary requirement for the upgrades to every single door. So we removed the bulk of the doors from site in the existing building, brought them back to our workshop, and then you can see images there of the necessary work that we had to do. It was mainly taking out existing panels, putting a fire-rated panel back inside, rebedding mouldings on intermittent paste and adhesive, new ironmongery, again, that could all be certified, drop seals for the acoustics, hinges, closers, everything that would comply to satisfy building control, including adding pieces of timber on to make the tolerances and the gaps suitable to take the intermittent strips. And so it was quite a challenge.
It was very well
completed. The existing door package as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Richard. So I think we've finished the presentation. We were really delighted that the project was shortlisted for a Wood Award in the kind of civic cultural building category. And I think we've got time now for some questions. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much to Rachel and all the panelists, of course. Yeah, that was great. I had quite a few questions in. I thought I would start with, there were two questions that that brought up shrinkage and tolerances. You know, one was in the context of the junctions between the existing masonry and the new timber structure. So, you know, how did you deal with the shrinkage that you would anticipate with the new timber structure? And the other one, similarly, was looking at the steel beams, which appeared to be supported by circular columns that looked like they were made of timber. And again, tolerances between those materials and the sort of movements that you might expect.
Perhaps if I start with the first question and Hannes could address the second one. So with the existing building, we specifically designed the floor slab of the link and the roof slab of the link to be set off the building by quite a large spacing. And that was partly because we needed to install a sort of a fireproof barrier at that point. Plus the detail was to have a recessed lighting track. So it actually kind of aided us to cut the slab short, the timber slab short. And then we have these large L-shaped brackets in lengths which went along, and there is a certain amount of tolerance within the fixings of the brackets. And yeah, that's basically how we did it. We did it by kind of undersizing it, essentially.
Thanks, Rachel. I try my best to answer an engineering question. But normally what happens, obviously, this is, the sheer nature of cross-laminated timber, because it's glued. The lamellas are glued perpendicular. So there's a certain stiffness, and the shrinkage is negligible. We are also talking about a two-story building here with not that high loads, essentially. Most of the offices, the staff is actually on the ground floor. There's an assembly room upstairs. When it comes to general tolerance, obviously what massively helped us, because everything is obviously straight cut. So that setback, that physical gap between the existing building and the new build obviously helped in terms of tolerances, because we also need to take into account plumbness of the wall, which I think it wasn't as plumb as it always looks to the naked eye. So we managed to do that quite well. Because the project was so highly visual, tolerances are tight. So we always strive for kind of tight joints, where visual panel meets visual panel. Obviously the interface, the detail I had up earlier with the column steel deck arrangement. Yes, obviously that works in compression. We had to coordinate with a steel fabricator some tolerances, slotted holes, to allow a bit of movement in the connection. But the detail, when you actually look at the detail itself, or the connection detail, that we try to keep that standard. But the devil is in the detail. It's just how the components come together.
Great, thank you. And actually, while we're talking about details, there was a question somebody just put to ask about the floor panels and how they were fixed to the steel beams. Was this just by tension screwed connections?
I don't know if it was a tension screw. It was a screw.
Okay.
So essentially, we had a main beam spanning across, which was also recessed into the decks. We actually had to prop up the decks first, to then put the beams in, and then screw fix the beam, or the angle brackets that were welded to the beam. We had to then screw them down into the deck before we could remove all the props, essentially. But it is screw connection, so there's no bolt connection, no concealed plug. In that respect, it is supported off the columns, hanging off the brackets.
Great. We had a couple of questions about the exposed timber, and how easy it was to sort of demonstrate compliance with building regulations. Somebody else had asked what product you'd used for the exposed timber, but would anyone like to say anything about that?
Yeah, I could start on I mean, one of the kind of beauties of the Eurban system, the system that was offered, was that we could choose which surfaces were visual grade and which surfaces were just standard. And so for a small cost difference, we ended up with these beautiful exposed walls at the first floor level going up into the roof lights. And we were able to keep at least one face exposed on each room. So we had originally planned to, for example, in the ground floor office space, to stop the wall linings short of the ceiling. But because the regulations changed during the period of the design process. We had to choose either it's the wall that gets covered or it's the ceiling that gets covered. You can't have both with the joint exposed at the corner. So we opted to line out the walls, and at the ground floor did that up to the ceiling with this ligno paneling. And Richard mentioned it comes with a fire retardant treatment already factory finished. It's a German product. So that sort of solved that issue at ground floor. And at the first floor, wherever there wasn't ligno and there was an exposed CLT finish or an exposed plywood finish, that was either, in some cases it was for acoustic reasons because we had to have an acoustically absorbent surface on one side of the room. There was a sort of an applied liquid fire retardant product that was just applied on site to those specific areas.
Yeah, I could just.
Is that right, Richard?
Yeah, that's correct. So we used all our joinery was finished in Morel's supplier have a product called Zero Fire. So that's available as a clear system and as a coloured system. So where it was onto solid materials and it was the oak veneer onto a fire rated substrate anyway, that was then further upgraded with the Zero Fire clear, and then all the internal cabinets are a fire rated MDF with, again, their colour system applied to give us that paint finish. So every piece of timber in there has a fire rated finish.
I think from
we had to submit a kind of quite a large document which dealt with all the fire rated issues, all basically demonstrated with the via certificates and product details to building control that we'd kind of met those standards. So that was across the whole project, which again needed quite a lot of kind of buy-in and explanation on site, I would say. And I think that was just reflecting the fact that the situation was changing, and that building control's kind of ability to kind of sign things off was also kind of undermined at that point. And there was a much lower kind of appetite for anyone going out on a limb approving something unless all the paperwork was there to back it up. So I mean, that's why we actually ended up having this really, really comprehensive set of reports done by Jerry Quayle with the historic doors, because it was such a sensitive subject. And the only way initially that we were told we could prove it was to actually, burn a door, do a mock-up. But we kind of managed to get around that via the elemental kind of certificates on each item, each product item that we'd used, and then kind of proving that together it provides the right treatment.
Were there any issues with building regs in terms of using stone? Not necessarily from a fire point of view, but just perhaps because it's a little bit unusual?
No, it was all pretty standard. I think that cladding system that Surround Me had developed on other projects was pretty straightforward. The only kind of complexity in terms of building regs there was just to agree the cavity barriers which occur at each floor level, and also so horizontally at each floor level, vertically wherever we have an internal dividing partition wall, there's a line within the cladding thickness of a fire barrier, and then at the top at the eaves level, and then around at each window opening. But they were kind of where we had a grouping of 3 windows. There's a kind of fire barrier that goes around that window within the thickness of the wall build-up. But basically, it was pretty. I think it was actually quite standard, the stone detailing, albeit quite tricky because of the kind of tolerances and the tight details.
Right? Great. I had a question asking if the steel beam in the floor could have been glulam.
I think, well, obviously we looked at all the options. Our preference and everyone's preference would have been to deliver an all timber building. But given the sheer complexity, I mean, I think if you remember seeing the slides of the mechanical ventilation the raised floor, how to actually bring all the services, modern services into these very compact rooms. We actually had to cross bridge ventilation from the corridor side into the main areas. So that was really the driving factor, is essentially size. And unfortunately, we dread to say it, as timber specialists, we had to revert to a steel beam because we could not make it work. Otherwise, it would have been a chunky timber section, which would have not worked architecturally.
Mm-hmm.
We try to hide it as best as possible.
You don't see any steel.
Yeah, but no, it's a very sustainable project, and it looks fantastic. Actually, I just wanted to ask, talking about things looking fantastic, I really like the look of the internal seating. Richard, I was just wasn't sure what that was made up of in terms of wood.
It's actually birch ply with again with this fireproof lacquer on.
Mm.
Yeah, and then obviously then an upholstered seat pad.
Yeah, it's really nice that the atmosphere in that room is quite special, and it's just off the entrance lobby. And so it's a room where if bereaved family members are arriving at the court and in distress, they can kind of quickly be shown into this room. The lighting is super calm because of the stained glass, and you've got this kind of amazing smell of timber all through the building. And in that room, we've got like these leather seat pads. So it's just this kind of natural smells that instantly make you feel calm when you go in there. So it's very, very successful. I think the use of the natural materials, the stone and the timber throughout the interior do really lend the building a kind of calm atmosphere and a kind of connection with nature, which I think probably in moments like that, where people are having to go to the court in sort of in extreme circumstances, is very comforting. So.
Well, thank you very much. I think we're going to have to wrap up there. There's a couple of other questions that we didn't get round to, and we'll endeavour to send responses to that by email. So I'm just going to very briefly, before signing off, show you our next webinar. That will be Rafter Walk. We'll be hearing from Whitby Wood and Xylotech about this fantastic piece of infrastructure, which hopefully you can see looking great on your screens just there. So please do sign up for the next one. And so all that remains is to say another thank you to our three panelists for a fantastic webinar, and enjoy the rest of your afternoons.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.